We all knew if I was going to film, yeah, Lexi was going to be a part of it, my bully. Okay, she's not going to leave me alone. I'm sitting on a chair, so it's not technically, but that ball is really gross, really. Lexi, bully. It's every single time I start talking, she knows I'm giving something else attention and she's not happy with it. Do not put the ball on my lap. It's nasty and gross. I love you. In today's video, oh my word, what a distraction. She's gonna lie down now. Okay. Oh, her feet are like right underneath the tripod. Anyway, in today's video, I thought it'd be really fun. Well, actually, I thought it'd be really fun. Well, I don't know. I hope this is going to be really fun. You guys say you like it when I ramble on. So I thought, let's make a ramble video. Let's talk about most frequently asked questions in the garden center. And let me tell you, it is not the questions that you would think it to be. Hello everyone, welcome to my jungle story. I'm Jacqueline, and I just thought it would be really fun to have a laugh today because these questions are, I don't want to say they're not ridiculous and they're not stupid, because there is no such thing as a stupid question. There really isn't. But when I was making up the list, it just made me giggle. It made me giggle because it also made me think of moments of these questions. Because if you are new here or you don't know this, I do work in a garden center. I work in the indoor plant department. So garden centers here in Belgium are, well, I feel like in Europe, it's not a big box store. It's not like that. I feel like a lot of the times if I see like tours of garden centers in like America or other countries, it's usually like the big box store, and it's definitely not that. Like you've got your garden centers, you've got your big box stores, you've got your farmers market stores kind of. But the garden center that I work in has quite a large indoor plant department. It's the departments that we have is outdoor plants, just like outdoor gardening in general, everything that you could need for outdoors, including like grass machines and all of that. We also have a animal section, also quite a big one, where we sell a lot of animals. We've got a decoration section as well. Yeah, we've got a decoration section. We've got a section where we keep all of the flower arrangements, like a bouquet. Oh my word, I'm like losing the words of what they are in English. That wind was getting quite bad. But yeah, we've got a decoration section. We also actually have a bistro. Lexi's gonna go ahead and open the door now. Lovely. Yeah, we also have a bistro where you can eat. Lots of different sections, a very big garden center. And yeah, I work every single day in the indoor plant department. So the only thing that I really have to do is take care of all of the plants. I do have to unload if we have like shipments in of pots and all of that, but that is pretty much all I have to do. But yeah, I primarily have to take care of the plants. I also have a colleague, but she's only there 2 days in the week, and we're not always there at the same time. But she works a lot less hours than I do. So I'm usually there on my own. A lot of the times we do sometimes have like students and all of that come to help, but that is it. So I have written down 5 questions that I get asked the most. And I've also done them in order. So I'm going to start off with number 5, which is a question that I'm going to say each question, and I'll say like how many times a week or how many times a month that this specific question gets asked. So I'm just going to get straight into it because I'm rambling. But this is a ramble video, so that's fine. So question number 5. Which is out of the 5, the one that gets asked the least amount. So question number 5, do houseplants need water? Let's just sit with that question for like a little bit. Because in the beginning, I didn't really know how to react to this question. I'm sorry. Do you not realize what's going on, my girl? I'm not going to throw the ball for you now. Oh, she's being very needy. You're so cute. Yeah, let's sit with that question for a bit. Do houseplants need water? Now, when you first hear that question, whew, I am in her territory. So, yeah, I just got to be patient with her. She's doing a pretty good job at maneuvering her way around the tripod, if I'm being honest. She's doing a good job. So, do houseplants need water? Now, when I first heard this question, I didn't really know how to react because at first you think, well, that is a very, very stupid question. But it is asked. You need to think of it in a different context. So usually when people ask me, do plants need water? They will usually ask me like, does this plant need water? But what they actually mean, because this is what I have to do quite a lot in my job, is they ask me a question, but they don't mean it the way that they say it, which I know sounds very, very weird. But what they basically mean is they are asking me how much. Like, how much water does this need? Does this need a lot of water? Is it like a cactus where it maybe only needs water like once a month? But again, it also really does depend on your conditions. So yeah, when I first heard this question, I didn't really know how to react. I think my face said it all, and the person just started laughing and said, no, I don't mean, like, I know that this plant needs water, but, and then they like elaborate and they explain a little bit more. And I'd never just like, when a client comes up to me and asks me a question, I always start, no matter what the question is actually, I always start asking them what are the conditions that they have in their home, like lighting wise, humidity, do they have floor heating or regular radiators, everything like that. Is, south facing, what orientation, and all of that. I always ask multiple questions because I think that's the best way that I'm able to help someone, because it's not just about, okay, you see, for example, a oxalis, and you know that that plant is a thirsty one, and you know that it needs a lot of water. But at the same time, if that person decides to put an oxalis in a bathroom, it might need less water. It might not need to be watered as often as someone who were to put it in an area like this, which is kind of like a conservatory, where the top is like sun is beaming through here, and it gets very, very hot in here in summer. It really does depend on your conditions. But I do think that's quite a funny question. It's quite a funny question. And the amount of time that this question gets asked is definitely at the least once a week. Take into consideration that I work 28 hours a week. I don't work full time. I am there more than my colleague. Like, my colleague doesn't work in the weekends and I do. And most questions do get asked in a weekend. It's just busier than anyway. But yeah. I'm only there 28 hours a week, and that is a question that I get every single week is, does this plant need water? And I just think that's so funny. I really, really think that's funny. But if you dig a little deeper, you know that most people are digging to see like how many times a week, how many times a month, they're digging a little bit more for that type of question, which will be coming up. Well, roundabout coming up. Then number 4, do houseplants need nutrients? That is also one that I think a lot of people make the mistake of not giving enough nutrients to their houseplants. That is, I would say that is a question that I get every second day, definitely. People don't really like stop and think, okay, this is actually a like living organism, and I usually answer with, well, we need food, they need food as well. But not like in a sarcastic way or like in a mean way. But, I do try and get them to see it in a different light where they will remember, oh yes, actually, that is a good point. They do need nutrients a lot more than what we realize. And I mean, in today's garden centers, you've got fertilizers for literally all of the different types of genuses. Like, there are so many different types. Like, I think we've got ones for palms, for cacti, for succulents. We've got a general one. We've got one just for hydroponics, one for more Mediterranean plants. We've got ones for flower beds, ones for, you know, in your greenhouse, all that. We have so many different types of fertilizers, but yet people still ask that question, like, do your plants need nutrients? And I think that also goes with the mistake of the potting soil, specifically the one, I think it's anywhere in the world, but I know the one that here in Europe, there is on the packaging, it says like there's up to 100 days of fertilizer in the soil. And that's usually like worm castings, or in some of them there'll be osmocote or something like that. So that will already be in the soil, but it usually is with worm castings that they do it. But you don't actually know, because a lot of the times these bags, there is moisture in the bags, in the potting soil. And if there's moisture, those nutrients are eventually going to wear out. So if you have a bag, you pick up a bag on their pallets or whatever that they're on, you don't know how long that bag has been on there. You don't know how long it's been lying there. You don't know. So that like 100-day tag that's on there, I always I avoid those garden center soil mixes anyway, just because you will 100% get fungus gnats if you use that soil. And it's very, very dense, very dense. You can, however, use it and mix it with other components like perlite and orchid bark, but you will get fungus gnats in there. But yeah, the nutrient thing, it also makes me chuckle. It really, really does. Because I get this question asked the most frequently by clients who actually spend a lot of money on plants. So sometimes we have days where people come in and they will buy the XXL plants. Like we have specific tables, and the XXL table with the really, really big plants is usually the one that we have to refill every single week. So we order plants every single week, but that table is always almost empty by the end of the weekend, by the time that we have to like reorder again. We always order on a Monday to after the weekend. And it just amazes me because people spend so much money on big plants, and I'm talking plants over 100 euros, but they don't take into consideration this plant needs nutrients. Like, you don't want to have to buy a new plant every single year. And I do see that a lot, that people do that. They will buy a beautiful big lush plant and they'll use it for, over the summer or whatever, or put it in their veranda or whatever they want to do. And then the next year they'll just come and buy a new plant because that plant is not looking very good anymore. That's the same thing with orchids. Like, people will just throw their orchids away after they've bloomed, and they'll just go ahead and buy a new one because they want the orchid for the blooms. But if you just, you got to wait a year, but sometimes you can be lucky and orchids can, bloom for you in a couple of months' time again. You never know. It's the same thing with that, with the big plants, buying the big plants. I always try and make a joke out of it. Like, if I see a client is really indecisive and thinking, oh, I want that one or that one, or a client that's really picky about a plant but is going to spend a lot of money on a plant, I always try and make conversation with them. And then as soon as I start a conversation, I will try and slide it in there, hey, don't forget to feed your plant. So I do try and slide that in there, because otherwise they are just the plant's going to be dead by next year if it's not gotten any nutrients, or there's going to be something wrong with it, or it's just not going to be happy. It's not. They need food. We need food. So plants also need food. They're living organisms just like us. So yeah, that is number 4. Number 3 is, how many times a week or a month does this plant need water? So they'll come to me with the specific plant and they'll ask that question. And usually on a lot of house plants, there's always a little tag there, and it always says 1 or 2 times a week, and I'll always say on there. And a lot of people, you'll be surprised that there are so many people that read that tag and really take it to heart, because that's what they've got. They think all the information is there on that tag and that's all I need, and the plant will be fine if I just follow the instructions on that tag. But that is usually not the case, because if you have a look at the tag of I wonder if I've still got one. I do have a new plant here. I'm gonna see if I got it. Oh, here you go. This is perfect. I've still got a tag from it. So this is my tag from the cuddly cactus. I recently made a reel on it. As you can see the name there, cuddly cactus. And always on the back of the tags, there's always like a little, I usually talk about where the plant comes from and all of that. The plant passport is also always on there. And this one says, so full sun, it says between the 5 to 30 degrees Celsius. It says 1 to 2 times a week, and it's not for consumption. Yeah, that's always on there. By law, that has to be on there. But 1 to 2 times a week for a cactus. You're going to kill that plant. You're going to kill that plant. So I've had that plant for over 2 weeks now. I have not watered it since I've had it. And I pulled it out of the pot the other day because I wanted to have a look at the root system, and I could see new root growth there. So it's still growing. It still seems to be happy. But 1 to 2 times a week for a cactus? Like, if you were to do that, if you were someone who was just going to the garden center because you want to buy plants to fill up whatever area, and you just want greenery, but you're not necessarily want to, like, you know, overly take care of a plant or have lots and lots of plants, you will look at this tag and you will take it, you will do exactly what this tag tells you to do. But if you do that one to 2 times a week, you will, by the end of the month, have a rotten cactus. So I always say, when someone does come up to me and ask me the question, you know, how many times a week or how many times a month does this specific plant need water, I will always say, do not read the tag. Don't do it. Don't do it. If you want a dead plant within a month or 2, go ahead, read the tag. But if you want your plant to thrive and you want to take care of it, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Yeah, I would have 100%. This plant would have already been mush if I watered it 1 to 2 times a week. So yeah, don't look at the tags. And usually what I say with this question is, I say the same thing every single time, I know. I always say that about the tag, and I also always say it really does depend on the conditions that you have in your home. It really, really does. Because you could have floor heating, for example, and not have a humid. Like, I'm actually quite surprised when I ask people. A question that I ask clients quite frequently is, do you have a humidifier? I'm actually quite surprised at how many people say, yes, I do have a humidifier. So, I mean, it's not just for plants, obviously, you know, boosting humidity in your home, especially when it's like really, really dry, you know, it's good for your skin, it's good for health. But it did surprise me. It did surprise me. I'm going to be honest. But yeah, I always say it depends on your conditions. It really, really does depend, because it doesn't only depend on the conditions in your home, but it also depends on where in your home. Are you putting it in your bedroom? Are you putting it in your bathroom? Are you putting it in your conservatory? It depends on where you're putting it. So I sometimes also ask, like, do you actually have a picture? Because that's also something that I'm quite surprised at, is that people take pictures of where they want to put the plants, and then they come up to me and ask me, I want to put a plant here. There's a window here, a window there. That's the orientation. Like, they give me quite a lot of information, and it's also like the best way of me being able to help you. I need to change my memory card. I have to try and think now, what was the last thing that I said? Very distracting, having to like change something in between of you talking. Yes, that's what I was saying. I'm quite surprised at like how many people do that and show me, you know, the conditions and everything, where they want to put the plants and all that. A lot of the times I have convinced people of putting the plants somewhere else, because it's usually quite a dark corner. And in garden centers, you don't need to come and say, you know, get a grow light. they're more than likely not going to do that unless you see, like, I really noticed it by the plants that they buy. Then you know what like type of plant parent they are, and you can kind of suss them out a little bit. But yeah, that information is like the best way of me being able to help the clients, is if I know all of that and if I know what they go, you know, where they're going to be and all of that. So that is usually what I will say, that it really does depend on those conditions. And if they give me more information and like more details, then I am able to say more, but I will never like 100% know. I usually say, you know, check with your finger. You can also get like those, I mean, the moisture meters sell at work pretty good, because a lot of the times if people buy a plant, they will repot it, but they'll use potting soil from in the garden center. So it's a very dense mix. So I will usually go off that, and a moisture meter with those incredibly dense soil mixes is actually very, very helpful. So in my case with like, you know, the aroid mixes and all that, it's not that helpful. But with those mixes, and usually also what the plants come in from the growers, it is always a super dense mix. So the moisture meters do really help there. So I do sometimes recommend that as well. But another thing that I do is with a finger, I tell them to, you know, like stick their finger about that deep into the soil. And, you know, if it comes out dry and crumbly, go ahead and water. It also does depend on the plants. Like if it's, for example, an alocasia, I will tell them not to stick their finger so deep, because alocasias do like more moisture. And it really does depend on the genus and what type of, not only the genus, but also the species, what type of plant it is. And, you know, go from there. I always ask them what they're going to do with it. Are they going to, something new at work is also hydroponics. Like we actually have a semi-hydro mix at work. It's quite new on the market, like in garden centers mainly, not on the market. Like you can get it from most companies that sell soils, but in a garden center setting, it is quite new, and people were quite interested, like with the water meter and everything. But I have to say, a lot of people are very nervous about it, because they do have to completely strip the plant of all of the soil. And, you know, that's how they buy the plant. And if you get like an alocasia, they can shock. So, you know, it's a bit of like a testing the waters type of thing. But yeah, with that question, I honestly just go in with like even more questions. And I ask them as many questions as I can to try and get like a feel of where this plant is going to be living. And I base it off that. But usually the way the conversation ends is I always say, be careful. Like just monitor the plant. It's not about, you know, you've got like all of these apps like to set schedules and you know, check the, I'm not about that. They might work for some people, but for me, it's just not the way. But people who do use that, I always still tell them to, you know, do that extra step and just check, monitor the soil. I also always advise clear pots, because that's also very, very easy to monitor if it needs water or not. Okay, the last two questions. Wait, I didn't mention how many times a week. How many times a week does the third question? So the question, how many times a week, a month does this plant need water? That is also probably, I would say that number 3 and number 4, they're like every 2 days I will get asked that question. The next two are questions that I will get every single day. And number 1, I will obviously get asked a little bit more than number 2. But number 2 is, can you give me recommendations on a plant that can live in full sun? And the thing is, in the indoor plant department, a lot of the tropical plants, because that's what they are just tropical plants that are just grown outdoors in tropical conditions, like obviously not what Belgium can provide and what a lot of us can't, you know, provide. They are tropical plants, and usually a lot of them are living underneath the canopy of big trees in rainforests and jungles and, you know, all of that stuff. So this is a question where I also can't sometimes find it difficult not to like giggle when they ask me, because it's kind of like, well, we have tropical plants, yeah, like these are all tropical plants. There's not a lot of plants that are going to lack full sun. Like even my cacti and my succulents, if I were to put them on my south-facing window and I were to take off that privacy screen that we have on there, and it's quite a thick one as well, I think I would still have cacti and succulents that would just burn, because the sun, specifically on a south-facing window, it can be very, very harsh, and it can also get incredibly hot. So it's kind of hard to, I usually then just say cacti and succulents, but I will always say with that, like, can you not put maybe like a little like film on the glass, or like thin blinds, or, you know, I try and talk about that a little bit, because it's very difficult to say, okay, yeah, cacti and succulents, because again, like I just said, I know that if I were to do that with some of mine, they would just burn. It would just be too harsh of sun. And again, conditions are everything. You don't know what type of conditions. Yeah, and a lot of the times when you ask them what's the orientation, like is it south, north, west, east, whatever, they don't know. So, you know, I'm not going to tell them to go home and then come back and tell me. That's not going to work, obviously. You still have to, in a garden center, I mean, I do try. I mean, a lot of the times, I think if my boss were to hear me, she would say, Jacqueline, you're supposed to sell, you know. I'm technically a salesperson, but I'm also not going to send home. I'm also not going to send people home with plants that I know are going to die within a month's time. I want those clients to come back and say, hey, you gave me some great advice. You really, really helped me. You helped me bring this plant back to life and make it thrive. You know, I want that. I don't want them to necessarily buy a bunch of plants. You know, I want my help and my advice to be useful and, you know, make sure that they come back. That's my goal. And I know that the typical salesman, or whatever the, like, in between words, or I don't know the right way of saying it, but I'm definitely not like 100% a salesman. I'm first going to make sure that that plant is going to be happy. That's my number one concern when selling plants is that plant going to be happy? And sometimes I have just said, you might need to go back to the decoration section and look at the fake plants, because I don't think you can put a plant there. And, you know, people are not very happy when you say that, but I'm also not going to lie. I'm not going to say, buy this plant, and, you know, a month later they'll come back and say, hey, you gave me wrong advice. My plant died. You know, it's kind of, that's just my opinion. That's just my opinion. I know that there are other salesmen that look at it a different way, but I don't know. I feel like in this century, we're not like that anymore. Not salespeople are not like that anymore. I don't know. Maybe it's just the branch that I'm working in with like plants that it's different, but I'm definitely not going to misinform a client about a plant. Definitely not. And with this question, with the number 2 question, a plant that can handle full sun, a lot of the times they will go home without a plant, because I'll suggest a plant, or before I suggest a plant, the question that I always ask is it getting morning sun or afternoon sun? Because afternoon sun is the harshest sun. If it's getting a little bit of morning sun, no problem. I've got alocasia that are getting morning sun, but if I were to put them on my south-facing window, they would be brown by the end of the day. I always, again, usually a question, I will reply with another question. I'll always ask more questions than what they asked me, because, again, that's the best way that I can help the client. Battery died. I've been talking for way too long, but yeah, it's just fun. You know, this is my job. I am passionate about it, and I do find it funny. It's also, you know, connecting with clients. It's, when it comes to plants, there's more of a chilled, like happy level to it. It's not as serious as, I don't know. Sometimes when I go and help on the outdoor plant department, I sometimes feel like people are very like very strict, like, oh, if I put this plant there, and how many centimeters does that have to be? It's just like, I feel like it's more technical and more serious. I don't know why, because it's gardening, you know, gardening is supposed to be But I don't know, when it comes to indoor plants, I feel like I get like the mellow side of the clients. So yeah, I mean, I love my job. So yeah, this is gonna be a very rambling video, but you guys said that you liked that. So anyway, I was talking about question number 2, and every single time I have to do something with my camera, I forget about what I'm talking about. I need to have a good night's sleep. That's been a long time. I was saying, I remember now. I usually always, I don't bombard clients with questions, but I do ask a lot of questions as well, because I want to be able to help them in the best way possible. And with the number 2 question, that's, yeah, like I said, a question that I get every single day. And it always depends on the answer to, is it morning sun or afternoon sun? If it's morning sun, it's quite a lot of plants that I can recommend. Like I'll even recommend alocasia or something like that. But I will always say to them, you need to acclimate the plant, because a lot of the times these plants are coming out of greenhouses, garden centers, and yes, they are getting a high amount of light, but they are not getting any direct sun on them. You know, it's all very indirect, bright light that they're getting, because it's a greenhouse. You know, there's still a filter. It's not direct. So I always tell them to, maybe if they have like a thin blind, which most of them do have like thin blinds. I feel like I don't have any blinds downstairs, but yeah, most people say, yeah, I've got like a thin blind, I can do that. And I said, yeah, you can slowly acclimate the plant and do it that way and get it so that you can put it in full sun. But whenever it's afternoon sun, I say no. I say, no, sorry, I don't, because the acclimation period, you can do it 100%, but the acclimation period to get it to that point is so incredibly long. But that's the clientele that comes into a garden center is usually people that don't want to spend so much time on the plant. You know, they just want a pretty plant, have some greenery in that corner, or, you know, that's usually the clientele that comes into a garden center. And sometimes you even get like people like me. Before I worked in a garden center, and I remember I went to this specific garden center to go and buy a Monstera elbow. They had a lot of rare plants there, and the person working there gave me some very bad advice on Hoya, and said, yeah, Hoyas can live in incredibly low light and they will still be happy. And I kept my first Hoya carnosa in incredibly low light, and it did so bad until I put it on my south-facing window, and it just turned into a beast. So you can also have that side of it. So, you know, I think it depends on, one, the seller itself. You can be someone who's just there to do your job, or someone like me who comes home and I live in a jungle. It's, you know, it's kind of, it does depend on the person. And I have sometimes also had some people like recognize me, which is very, very weird. Like I never know how to react when they do recognize me. I don't know. I find it I don't really know how to react. I kind of like, I don't feel awkward, but I just feel like, oh my word, you actually know who I am. You actually watch my videos. Like sometimes I think nobody watches my videos, but I think it's also, I always expect in my analytics I'm going off on a tangent, chat, sorry. I always expect in my analytics, it says most of my audience is from the States. So I always think like, oh, no one in Belgium or Europe, they're not going to know me. They're not going to know me. But I'm actually quite surprised that it might only be like 2% Belgium, but it's still a percentage. It's still there. So it always surprises me. And then the number 1 question that I get asked is, can this plant live in this corner? And then they will usually show me a picture, and it will be an incredibly dark corner. So in other words, can this plant survive in low light, no light practically? I get that question easily 2 to 3 times a day. Easily. Even in the week when it's like not busy. Easily. And I do really appreciate people like taking pictures of where they want to put the plant and actually asking the question. But again, if I did not work there, and if that person that, for example, gave me that Hoya advice, if that person worked there, that person might get like completely wrong information. And that kind of makes me sad for the plants that then have to try and survive in that corner. But I always think of it from like the plant's perspective, and I always think, how is it going to do? Like, how long is it going to live? How much water are you going to give it? Like, I always feel very bad for the plants. A lot of the times when people ask me that question, I honestly, it's sad that I have to say this on a daily basis, but I have to say, have you thought about putting a fake plant there? Like, do you necessarily want a real plant, or do you just want greenery there? And surprisingly enough, a lot of people say that they just want greenery. So I just tell them to then go to the decoration section, and I tell them to, there's some really nice fake plants there that look very, very real. You pay a fortune for them, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. But it's not going to die on you. It's going to be there forever. So yeah, I guess that's why they're so expensive. And there's definitely a difference. Like, there's definitely a difference in some fake plants. But anyway, I don't know. I do really try and help the clients, and I usually connect with those clients the most because we have like a good laugh, and the more we talk about it and the more I talk to them about, like plants in general and what they need, they almost realize like, oh, I know I want to give this. It either goes two different directions. Oh, I really, really want to be able to give this plant the best because I really like this plant. Or, no, I don't want that much maintenance. No, I'm just going to go back to I'm just going to go look at the fake plants. It usually goes in those two directions. And usually the people that go for the fake plants are people that I won't like instantly vibe with. I get the impression that they almost feel like I've stepped on their toes, like they're a little bit hurt that I said, okay, no, you need to go for fake plants. Because I feel like it almost, when you say that, people automatically think like, oh, you think I can't keep a plant alive. But it's like don't go into that discussion, because then you have to think, well, you showed me a picture of a corner where there's practically no light and you want to put a plant there. A plant needs light. And it's kind of like, I try and avoid saying that, because that does really, it's very difficult to say that and not come across like, okay, you're being stupid. Like, yeah, a plant is a living organism. It needs light. It needs to photosynthesize. It needs, I don't know how much clearer I can be. So that is a very difficult one. So again, when a client asks me that question, it can go in completely different routes. And sometimes people will felt like I've stepped on their toes because I've said, okay, I think you should go for a fake plant. But the people that then say, oh no, but I really like this plant. What if I put it here? What if I put it here? Those are the people that I just instantly vibe with. And those are usually also the people that come back and they'll say hi, but not in a way like, oh, you remember me, from our conversation and all that. So that's the part that I absolutely love about my job, is just that connection with people. That's also why I love doing YouTube, is the connection and talking about plants and just helping each other out. And when a client in the garden center comes back and says go and talk to her, I sometimes have people come up to me and say, are you Jacqueline? I say, yeah. And they say, yeah, one of my friends says, to come and talk to you because you know a lot about plants and you gave really good advice with this one particular plant and it's doing so much better. That instantly makes my day. And that's why I love doing what I do and why I love being in the indoor plant department. Yeah, that number one question, definitely 2 to 3 times a day. But it's also a question that it just depends on the person. It really does depend on the person. I feel like I can pick up on someone's vibe and someone's aura very, very quickly. And sometimes there are just some things that you cannot say to everyone. There are some people that are so persistent. It's usually actually people who have a business. There was this one catering company that had a hall where they would have events and all of that. And they had this one corner where they wanted to put a plant. And I said, look, unless you put a grow light there, whatever plant you put in that corner, it is eventually going to die. Some plants might die slower than others, like an alocasia. That plant might be yellow next week if you put it in that corner. You know, it depends, but either way, a plant is going to die if you put it in that corner. And they are so incredibly persistent. And yeah, it is. It usually is with clients that like have their own business and want to have greenery. Or they're like, yeah, no, but we want this one. It's so nice and big. And by the fake plants, there's not a plant that is this big. And I'll say like, oh, why don't you put it on a table? Then it looks bigger. But I repeat myself a lot with those clients. Like, your plant is eventually going to die. And I've even sometimes had clients say, well, no, it's fine. It's just for an event. So if it dies, that's okay. We'll just come and get another one. When I hear clients say that honestly, I don't really know how to react, because I'm a plant parent myself. And I just think about this poor plant that's dying. And they've just bought it. They've just spent like over like hundreds of euros on a plant, on a big plant. And it's just for one event, and they're just going to let it die. Because a lot of the times we get a lot of questions like, do we rent out plants? And we don't. Like, we don't do that. That's just like a recipe for disaster, especially in a garden center. Like, I know there are companies that do that, but no, you can't do that in a garden center. Like, that's just a recipe for disaster. It really is. But we do get that question quite a lot as well. Probably at least once a month we get that question, like, do we rent out plants for events? But usually people with like businesses, they don't care. They'll just buy the plants and they'll just let it die. And what I sometimes then try and do is I try and say, okay, no, do that then, but then maybe after the event, move the plant and put it over there, because then it will thrive in that spot. And then the next time you have an event, you can put that plant there for that event, but then put it back in that spot again, you know, so it's happy. So it's only for that one event, that one day. I try and do that. I'm like bartering for the, trying to like negotiate for the plant's survival. It really is. Like, some people really don't care. Like, they just don't care. They see it as, oh, like, plants, there's so many different varieties. There's so many different varieties. There's so much available. Oh, it's fine if it dies. It's not the end of the world. But it's just like, I don't have that opinion or that view on plants. So that is hard. That's definitely the hard side of the job. And that is actually a reason why I left the animal department, because probably a lot of you don't know this, but I actually have a diploma in animal care and welfare. And I studied in England. And I worked in the animal department for over a year at the same garden centre where I work now. They have a lot of animals there, but like a lot of animals there. A little bit too much, in my opinion, for what a garden centre should have, especially for the amount of staff that we have. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. But I couldn't do it anymore. Like, I actually couldn't do it anymore. I asked if I could like be moved to another department, and I worked hard to prove myself in the indoor plant departments, because I couldn't stay by the animals anymore, because I was so, every single day, like every single time someone went home with an animal, I still remember to this day, and I've been working in the indoor plant department for like 2 years now. I still remember to this day the 4 clients, 4 out of the over a year that I worked there, and bear in mind we sold animals every single day. 4 clients that all 4 of them were ones that bought bunnies. I still remember the bunnies. I still remember the clients like it was yesterday. I still remember the feeling of, with those 4 clients, I knew that that bunny was going to a good home. And I had that 4 times. And all of the other times I was like, this bunny is not going to be happy. It's not. But the problem is that as a salesperson, you cannot say no to clients. You can't, which I think is absolutely ridiculous, especially when it comes to animals. Don't even get me started about that. That's a whole other tangent. But yeah, I just had to leave that department. I really, really did. And I do still struggle with the same type of problem with the plants, like knowing that the plant is not going to go to a good home. But I have a better time trying to convince the client of like compromise and try something different and maybe put it there instead of the spot that you actually wanted it in. I have a lot better time at that than with the animals, because with the animals, that's just, A lot of the times people are coming in to buy bunnies for their kids or chicks for Easter, which okay, don't go off on a tangent. I'm not here to talk about that. That makes me emotional. That really makes me emotional. I'm thinking about it too much. Anyway, my point is that that's why I had to leave. I'm an animal carer. I studied animal care. I'm not here to sell animals. Like I can't do it. Yes, a part of our daily routines was taking care of the animals, but they were primarily there to be sold. And I can't do that. I can't do that, especially when you cannot say no to a client. Like if I know that that animal's not going to go to a good home and I cannot say no, I couldn't do that anymore. I would sometimes go home in tears. And I spent most of my time in the animal department pregnant. So hormones and, mommy instinct. So it's kind of the same thing with the plants, but it's a lot easier to try and convince, the clients and try and convince them different ways. And a lot of the times they'll go home with no plants. But I always say at the end of a conversation, like, look, I'm going to be honest with you. I might work in a store where we have to sell products, but I'm still a person. I'm still going to be me. I'm still going to give my opinion, and I'm still going to try and give you the best experience with that plant, because I want to see that plant thrive. I don't want this client to come back next month and say, hey, this plant is dead now. So yeah. It's brought up a lot of emotions, this topic. But no, I mean, usually I have more like laughs in the indoor plants department. It's just, sometimes people go home with a huge cart of plants after talking with me. Or sometimes they go home with no plants. It just depends on what they want to do for the plant. It's not about, I want this. Especially when you come to me for advice, it's not about what you want. It's about what the plant wants. If that plant wants those conditions and you want to put it there and it's not going to work, that plant is not going to be happy. It's not going to thrive. It's not, it's a mixture of a lot of different clients. But, it makes it fun. It makes it interesting. It makes it, it's sometimes I can have a real giggle to myself. And there's even moments where I have to go to the warehouse part. And we actually at work have 2 separate warehouses, and right next to the indoor plant department is where the first warehouse is. So I sometimes quickly go in there to have a good laugh after dealing with a client that does not understand that a plant needs to be watered that often, or a plant needs nutrients. Oh, I didn't know that. I never used to give this product to my plants. A lot of the times with the nutrient thing, people will look at me like I'm crazy. And I sometimes do doubt myself with the reactions that I sometimes get from clients, because it's is that really to me, that's normal. That's perfectly normal. But obviously you have to put yourself in their shoes and kind of paint a picture in your head of what it's like for them, so it's definitely a lot of people reading. That definitely does go on in my work. Definitely. Anyway, this is going to be a very long video, and I can feel my throat is starting to get a little bit scratchy. But I don't know. I don't know if this video is going to be interesting or not, or I don't know. I just thought it would be fun for you guys to hear about what I have to deal with on a daily basis, the questions that I get. I think it's fun that, I am a plant parent. I do social media and all of that about plants and all that. But my job, my main job, is also working with indoor plants and also giving advice to clients and all of that. And it's definitely, it's very interesting. I've also taken my fair share of courses at work. And they're very basic, because a lot of the times it is very basic questions in garden centers. But, it's also very interesting, and you also learn a lot. You can be a botanist and you could have studied for years and years and years on end. There will always be something new. There will always be something that pops up, something new, something newly discovered or like new genuses, new species. There's always something new. We don't know everything, and we'll never know everything. Yeah, we'll never know everything. But I thought it was fun to talk about the questions that I get quite frequently. It's brought up some fun memories, it definitely has. But yeah, if you work in a garden center, or if you have, it doesn't even have to be in a garden center, if you have friends or family or whatever that ask you frequent questions about houseplants, because I'm assuming that if you watch my videos and you are subscribed, that you also have a plant collection, that that you also have plants, that you also have a planty area, or any of that. So my question to you guys, what questions do you get? I'm quite interested to hear about that. What questions do you get from like your friends or family members that are not necessarily like plant people, or maybe they want to get into the hobby? What are the questions that you get? I think it would be really fun to hear that, and let's continue the conversation in the comments. Let me know if this video was interesting or anything. Don't be mean, obviously, but I do like your feedback, and I do like to hear, what interests you in content. I recently posted a video about the light meters and showing you, comparing to the plants that I keep in low lights, because I did get a lot of questions on that. So I do read my comments, I do take in what you guys say, and I love chatting with you guys. I really, really do. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't yet and you want to come along with me on my jungle story, don't forget to click subscribe and also click the notification bell. It lets you know whenever I've posted a new video. If you watch this video all the way to the end, leave the question mark. Leave the question mark emoji. If you found this video funny or entertaining in any way whatsoever, leave a little laugh emoji. Even that just lets me know if this was interesting or not, or yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I just thought it would be fun, a little change up. Yeah, if you leave either of those two emojis, it lets me know that you watched all the way to the end. It lets me know if you enjoyed this video. But if you did watch all the way to the end, thank you so much. View time is the best way to support my YouTube channel, and the best way to support me, because it does show up on the analytics, and I do see you. I know who does and who doesn't. So I do really appreciate it if you watched all the way to the end. And I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.